when you look at Hong Kong, right, the real estate market is not doing well. The government even have to reduce some of the cooling measures.
Agree.
Even when you look at Malaysia, right, the property prices are dropping. Our neighboring country. So what do you think, right? Out of all these countries, Singapore is like different.
Singapore property market is almost impossible to crash.
I disagree. Singapore property markets will be crashing soon because of the high interest rate, the cooling measures, the unaffordability, and overseas markets are not doing well. So prove me wrong.
I'm Sean, the probabilistic investor.
And I'm Ivan, the negative investor.
Why I say the Singapore property market is basically impossible to crash is because we are so protected by many factors. Most importantly, there are so many cooling measures out there, of course imposed by government, to basically assist and to ensure that the property prices stays constant or to grow it basically more organically.
Precisely when you're talking about cooling measures, right? Cooling measures, by definition of cooling, is to cool the market and make it low.
I understand, but the whole objective of why it's even being cooled in the first place because property prices are getting too high. Right? But I think to me, the last thing the government ever wants to do is to crash the market through these cooling measures, which is, by the way, is all pretty much imposed by the government, right? And the last thing they want to do is crash the market because it all impacts the mass market, which is then very bad, obviously, for potential voting in future.
But look at the latest cooling measure. The total debt servicing ratio, or TDSR, right, has gone from 60% to 55%, which means that people can only use 55% of their income and less expenses to buy a property. This means that when property prices go down.
Now, I think the biggest issue over here is not about people able to get loan or not. I agree that it's tougher to get a loan nowadays.
Are you saying that everyone pays in full for their property?
Definitely not, but it's something that Singapore have that many other countries don't have, this thing called CPF. Right, because of CPF itself, it does make it a lot more easier for typical Singaporeans to then afford the properties, right? And not to mention also there is also obviously also HDB in play, not just private properties, which of course majority of the population is able to go for HDB, which the government is heavily subsidizing such property as well.
But what about interest rates? I mean, if you look at interest rates, right, in 2022 it was like 1+% for a residential loan, but right now for floating it's like 4+, for fixed it's like 3.1. It's so much way higher.
You know the craziest part of that is that if you really look at overseas context, right, most of the interest rate today is like what, 6, 7, 8, 9, even 10%. In Singapore, we're like what, in a high interest environment, we're like 3+%, which is generally not high in comparable to the world itself, right? And that being said, at the end of the day, interest rate is one thing, but of course we must also look at interest rate, not just interest rate on the whole, but also what is the rental yield. Alright, that is of course you are able to get when you buy a private property.
Wait, let's not talk about overseas interest rate, right? Let's talk about local. Okay. Just now, right, I was saying 2022 1+. Now floating is 4.
Yes.
Fixed is 3.1.
Yes.
Isn't that higher, and won't investors demand a higher yield, or when it comes to a higher yield, this means a lower property prices crashing?
Now, that could be true. To me, I think that's true if the rental continuously or drops, right? But what happens if actually the rental goes up, right? And of course then you might say that, hey, what happens if then, how are you so sure that rental will keep going up? I think that's where we really need to look into a few factors. Number one factor, we want to look at employment rate. Is employment rate continues going up? Is the government strategy is to bring in more foreign tenants to push up the population? As long as population is growing, then I do not think that property price will crash, because if there's always humans to be put into the property, be it they rent or to buy, then it's very tough, right, for the property prices to crash. So all in all, I think that's pretty much almost impossible for it to crash, okay, as long as the government do not want it to crash. I think that's where it comes down to the core motivation of things, right? And because property ultimately affects all citizens, I think that's something that most governments in the world, not just Singapore government, right, will want to protect property price point. Right, but of course, that being said, that doesn't mean that they want the price point to go shoot up the roof, lah. Alright, that hence I'm very supportive cooling measures to come in, and whatever measures come in to really protect and to ensure that every Singaporean have a property, a roof around their head.
The key thing is, right, in Singapore, the property prices are getting unaffordable. Let me bring you back, right? In the year 2020 Q1, right, the price index was 152.1, and today, right, in Q3 2023, the price index is 196. This means it's a 29% increase in property prices. Think about it, a 1 million property has become almost 1.3 million. It's getting way more unaffordable. When it's unaffordable, the property prices will crash.
I acknowledge. I mean, it's unfortunate, right? The price gone up by almost 30%, but our salaries hardly go up by 30%. Hence, it's becoming a bit more unaffordable, right? But at the end of the day, you still need to look at what's the current data on hand. Number one, are the property still selling? The answer is yes. All right. If it doesn't sell, all right, then why would the property price continuously increase? Right? The only reason why it's increased because there is demand. There's actually purchasing these properties itself. That's one. Number two, is the rental demand also increasing? All right. The answer is yes, because rental price point or the index has continuously go up even in the recent quarters itself, and that's of course reflected by the new incoming of new citizens or basically new foreign talents coming to Singapore. And when there's supporting data of rental, according to the increased price point of the properties, all right, and hence it makes still a lot of sense for investors to continuously buy property, to invest, to rent out. And of course, most importantly, if you're talking about people who buy, or citizens like us who buy for their own stay, the last thing they want to do is sell their home, right? Not that what they do. They still have to spend more in rental. Because of that, I think Singaporeans will still continuously buy, even though it's getting more unaffordable, and investors could continuously invest because the rental market is still going very strong.
Okay, I have one extra question for you.
Yes.
If you take a look at the HDB prices, right, because of the whole COVID situation, right, there was like pent-up demand for people that want bigger space.
Yeah.
Hence, the HDB prices also shot through the roof.
Yes.
But moving forward in future, there's going to be more supply of HDB that will come online, and because of that, HDB prices will start to drop. And when HDB prices drop, won't private property fall in tandem?
I think there's two components to this. Number one is that do government wants the HDB prices to drop? Because if they want it to drop, I think it's very easy for it to drop because number one, the valuation drops, obviously more cash is needed to pay for the property, hence demand drop, right? That's one point, all right? Now, in recent cooling measures that came in, I don't think that's where the government is putting a lot of attention into for prices to drop, but rather to hold on to the price point. Yeah, the reason being because we are not seeing valuation dropping, we're not seeing sales index dropping, we're not seeing all this coming into play, right? So what's happening now is that supply is just increasing, which is great to help to normalize the demand and supply in the whole HDB market itself. So I don't think that prices will drop. I think overall, expecting HDB prices to continue to go up, I think that is insanity, because then it's very bad for the whole population in general. But I think that as of today, HDB prices is still affordable. In fact, it's still cheap.
BTO, I agree, but are you sure about resale?
I think it's still pretty affordable in resale. Alright, don't get me wrong. I think that it's not affordable for everyone, but just on the fact that HDB resale prices can go up to this level, it just only means that it is affordable, right? If not, then price point will not go up in the first place, right? Which means that in both aspects, people who can afford it, they can go for resale, right? If they want a house immediately. But those that cannot really afford it, there's still option on BTO, which means that both spectrum of the market is still being taken care of.
Okay, maybe what you said makes sense, but when you look at markets like China, right, Chinese developers are having a hard time. Also, when you look at Hong Kong, right, the real estate market is not doing well. The government even have to reduce some of the cooling measures.
Agree.
And when you look at US, it's also not doing very well. Even when you look at Malaysia, right, the property prices are dropping, our neighboring country. So what do you think, right, out of all these countries, Singapore is like different?
Jeez, I thought long and hard about this question, because obviously it's not an easy question, right? What makes Singapore so special compared to everyone else, right? I mean, every other country, right? I think number one thing is that what I really like about Singapore market, or Singapore in general, is that we have this thing called CPF. I think CPF is a very big component to stabilize the property market. Why? Because the government actually allows citizens, or basically PR, to use their CPF OA, alright, to actually pay off their mortgages. Hence, in terms of cash flow perspective, if you were to use your CPF to pay your monthly mortgage, it's actually cheaper to own as compared to even to rent, especially when rental keeps increasing as well. That gives a lot more holding power for most Singaporeans. Hence, that to me also protects a lot in terms of property value when it comes to Singapore properties, right? Because it's cheaper to buy, service a mortgage as compared to rent. That's one. Number two is that I think it's very important also that Singapore basically forced a lot of citizens, or basically anyone who buy property, to put down a significant amount of down payment for their properties, right? And that really gives them a lot of holding power to ensure that they do not just sell it at a loss, because that is immediate loss to the pocket. A good example would be, let's say in Malaysia, it's not uncommon for people to pay almost zero money for their Malaysia properties, right? Because of how the country works out. This means that it makes it very little incentive for the citizens over there to hold on to their property if things goes bad. Right, as compared to Singaporeans, alright, imagine you have 25% down payment, you have 20% down payment put in property. Who wants to make the 10% loss? You rather hold on, you need a roof over your head to stay anyway. Alright, hence with stronger holding power, that also protects in terms of price point itself. Of course, not to mention all the multiple cooling measures that has came to play. Cooling measure means that obviously artificially, or it's suppressed in terms of price point due to all these government factors. Alright, that they want to make sure that it's affordable for Singaporeans, which means that technically without all these measures, price point is going to be way higher as is what it is today. So given all these key few factors, of course there's many more other factors, alright, but given these few key factors, I think the Singapore market is pretty much almost impossible to crash.
I think
because
ultimately,
factors,
right, with so much negative factors, like what I shared with you, like cooling measures, like economic headwinds, and like other neighboring markets are not doing well, right? I won't be surprised if property markets, right, in Singapore goes down.
Unless things like Singapore government topple, World War comes to Singapore, the pandemic comes to wipe out half the population, or I mean things like that, it's crazy things like that happen, right? If not, then I really think that it's almost impossible for the market to crash, right? Because if we live life to the point where if we want to cross a road, we're scared that the car bang us, right? Then what's life, right? I think that's almost impossible to even thinking of putting $1 into any investment, even however safe it is, right? So probabilistically, I think a Singapore market is pretty much almost impossible to crash. Realistically, I think that prices might stagnate, might dip a little bit, but to the point of crash, probably not. Alright, but if you look at it on a long-term perspective, I think that organically prices should still increase as long as population continuously to grow.
So guys, if you agree with Sean, right, give a thumbs up with the video, and if you agree with me, type into comment to let Sean know what you think.
So guys, remember to check out other videos such as is diversification dumb, or will there be an oversupply of properties in 2024? With this, see you guys later on.
See you.